Good evening. I'm Carmen Rita Wong, a board member of the Moth and Storyteller. Welcome to a very special Moth event. Tonight, we dedicate this show to Black storytellers. As an organization, the Moth stands in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, our Black family, friends, and community. We are working with you toward justice and change. Thank you for being here to listen to these powerful stories. And thank you for your support of the Moth as it deepens its commitment to centering Black, Indigenous, and people of color throughout its work, and as it weathers the impact of COVID-19. We are grateful for you. Stories unite, and stories shape everything, from culture to policy to our nation. And our goal at the Moth is to raise up stories from all voices, new and familiar, and to shine a light on the full human experience. And bringing these stories into the world is what the Moth does best. Now, the Moth is even more determined to bring you virtual main stages and Moth slams to fill your airwaves each week with the award-winning radio hour and podcast, and to remain strong in the commitment to conduct workshops online with social justice organizations, with high school students, and with healthcare workers here in the US and around the world. Thank you again for your commitment to the Moth. It is now my great pleasure to bring to the stage a brilliant writer, satirist, and storyteller. He's a playwright and a senior staff writer for Elle.com, and his first book, which is wonderful, is called Here for It, or How to Save Your Soul in America. It came out earlier this year. Please help me welcome your host for this evening, R. Eric Thomas.
Hello, and welcome to the Moth. Thank you so much to Carmen Rita Wong for that wonderful introduction. And please give a round of applause in your homes or wherever you are to our musician, Sultana Isham. There are thousands, oh, I'll do it too, sorry. I'm rushing through, I'm so excited for the show. There are thousands of you here this evening to hear true stories told live in front of an audience. That's what we do at main stages. Now the question is, where is the audience? You may have noticed there are some differences between what we regularly do and what's happening right now. I'm here in my home, you're there in your home, unless you might be here, I don't know. The door is closed, but if you are, there's leftover pizza in the fridge, and feel free to take out the vacuum and do a little vacuuming. We have had to adjust a little bit, but the magic, the power, and the transformative experience of storytelling can reach through any screen. And so we hope to demonstrate that and experience that tonight. I'm here in Baltimore, and there is a thunderstorm happening because that's showbiz, folks. So I kind of feel like Vincent Price right now, like with the sound effects and the Foley. It's like, welcome to the Moth. So we're going to work through that. There are 49 states represented among the thousands of you watching this evening. One state is not watching. North Dakota was like, absolutely not. So we'll see what that's about. There are also 2 future states watching, DC and Puerto Rico. I see you as well. There are 17 countries watching this evening. Jamaica, Nepal, Uganda, Australia, China, England, Hong Kong, Indonesia. I could go on and on and on. There are people watching around the world. So to all of you, I say thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and goodness gracious, what are you doing up so late? We're going to get started in just a moment. If this is your first time watching a Moth main stage on Zoom, please make sure that your computer is plugged in so the battery doesn't die and you don't lose the end of a brilliant story. If this is your first time experiencing the Moth in general, I'll tell you just a little bit about it. The Moth is the art and craft of the personal narrative. It's true stories told live without notes, usually in front of an audience, but also you can find it on your podcast and radio waves. You'll hear people telling their experiences in life, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, sometimes dramatic, heart-wrenching, and everything in between. Tonight you're going to hear 4 stories, and we're going to have an intermission in between where Sultana is going to come back and play again. Each story is going to be about 10 minutes, and Sultana has graciously agreed to be our timekeeper as well. So at the 10-minute mark, Sultana is going to make just a little note, just to play a note to let them know that where they are. And it's going to sound something like this. Beautiful. Music. If they keep going, however, Sultana may give them a little bit more coaching, and it'll sound coaxing rather, and it'll sound like this. I love that. That was Britney Spears' Toxic, and yes, indeed. So that will cue the Sandman from the Apollo to come on and just sweep him off the screen. That's not really what's going to happen. The theme that the Moth has chosen tonight is We Rise, stories of community, resilience, and irrepressible joy. I love that phrase, irrepressible joy. It sounds like something out of like an infomercial. It's like, we tried 25 joys, and this one was the only one that couldn't be repressed. I love that. It's like the ShamWow of joys. I need some of that ShamWow joy, I tell you that much. On a scale of like meh to ShamWow, I'm not ShamWowing it lately. One of the interesting things that's happened recently is that people that I haven't talked to in years have reached out over the last couple of weeks over text or email and just said, how are you? And I don't know, it's very kind, but I don't know whether they're reaching out because I'm a Black person or because I tend to be like deranged on social media. It's like, how are you regarding like the experience of systemic oppression? Or how are you? I noticed you posted 17 videos from the original Broadway cast production of Ragtime at 2 a.m. Who can say? Who can say? But I'm also guilty of it too. I start every conversation these days, how are you? Because it's just the reflex. It's like, how do you have a conversation? And so like I have every Wednesday, I'll tell you this, every Wednesday I have therapy on the little Zoom, just like this, in front of a sheet, wearing a little blazer. You gotta dress up for yourself. And he shows up, and then immediately I'm like, hey, how are you? And lately he's just been like, ooh. And when your therapist is like, ooh, there's really nowhere to go. So we just like stare at each other for a while. And then eventually I'm like, well, to pick up where we were last week, Audra McDonald in the original Broadway cast of Ragtime was superb. And we just talk about that for 45 minutes. It's really therapeutic. Anyway, enough about me. You ready to hear some stories? I know I am. So you can read the bios of all of our storytellers and of course of myself in the email that we sent you. So instead, we do something at Mainstages that's a little bit different. I'm not going to read their whole bios. Instead, we pose all of our storytellers a question. This time we asked them, tell us something so fun you made it a tradition. And our first storyteller answered with a little story. She used to live in DC, and she would make bi-weekly trips to Virginia for Korean barbecue and with her friends. And there's a restaurant where they're playing K-pop videos all the time. And after they would finish their Korean barbecue, they would go back and get a dessert called snow cream. And they loved it so much, it became a tradition, and it was the first thing they did after the 2016 election. Sounds like a good way to cope. Welcome from all the way from Los Angeles, Amber J. Phillips.
Hello. So this one time, I woke up in the middle of the night and my mom was praying over me. Just standing there in the dark, having a little talk with Jesus. See, I had terrible anger issues as a kid. Like, it was bad. One time when I was about 7 years old, I'm not even sure what my uncle said besides breathing too hard in my general direction, but I responded by calling him a purple bastard. Yeah. See, my family was awesome though. Like, we loved each other, we supported each other, we cried as much as we laughed, and we loved each other loudly and boldly. But we were living paycheck to paycheck, and I hated it. I hated how present that feeling was of making it till Friday when my mom's check would clear again. My mom, a visionary truly, would transform the electric being cut off into these beautiful candlelit dinners with my sisters. And despite her best attempts, those magical moments began to wear off and our reality sank in with me. I could feel how hard my mom worked and worried. And I could see how we never seemed to have everything we needed and how few options we had in times of crisis. And it made me angry. And that anger was showing up in my behavior at home, especially at school and even at church. And I grew up in the type of family that was always at church. Like, if you don't have grandparents who sit on the leadership team of the deacon and deaconess board, you just really don't know my pain, honey. And then on top of that, my mom started working at our church as a secretary. Now, through this, she would become really great friends with a woman I would come to know and love as Aunt Gail. And Aunt Gail was amazing. Like, she could sing the Holy Spirit into any room. She sang like she knew God personally, and her God was like that family member that would shake $20 in your hand at the family dinner when you were on your last dime and unsure of how you were going to make it home. See, Aunt Gail's God had seen her through a couple of tough situations. And she is what you would call a born-again Christian, meaning she grew up in the church, dipped out to live her best life, and then made her return, a resubscribed Christian, if you will. See, one of my favorite things about Aunt Gail is she used to bring her own collection of instruments to Sunday service, meaning regardless of what was going on in the front of the church, if the Spirit so moved her, she was going to cue up her own solo and play the backing tambourine, okay? She was a true performer, and her talent was only matched by her devotion to our church. And I just wanted to grow up and have that kind of audacity. Now, I was also a little afraid of Aunt Gail. See, she was also one of those folks, she used to carry a Our Daily Bread devotional booklet. I'm speaking to the old time believers now, in addition to a pack of Newports in her purse. This combination alone told me that she was also a cussing Christian, and so was I. Now just be cussing. But at the time, I was a kid, and it was really out of control. So much so that my mom decided to take me to therapy. Yes, my Black mother took me to therapy. And I remember I was about 10 years old, and this is when I started to get a little worried. I was sure that this was like the prerequisite before I ended up on one of those Murray shows where they humiliate the kids and then send them to boot camp. So as we walked into my therapy session, my mom looks at me and she gives her, "You better not go in here and show your ass" speech. So I walk in and I speak to this perfectly fine white man for about an hour and tell him all about my life as this young Black girl growing up in Columbus, Ohio, with my sisters, raised by my mom, and all of my family members who live within a 10-mile radius of our home, which is a lot of family members, I might add. After I was done laying my burdens down to this complete stranger, my therapist, my mom comes back into the room and he gives her a report back. Now, his report back told the perfect line of our new doctor-patient relationship while also giving my mom the information she needed and a recommendation. He says, "See, Amber is expressing a lot of feelings of fear and helplessness. Her hostility seems to be rooted in her feeling out of control because she doesn't have any money. So I would really recommend that you think about giving Amber an allowance." Now, as soon as he said it, I felt instantly betrayed. Like, how did I explain this so wrong? How did I not communicate to this person that if I don't have the money, my mom also doesn't have the money? We're in this together. So as we left, my mom looks at me and she says, "I will never make you go back there again." And that was, at least we were on the same page. You know, at this point, my mom was tired and her needs weren't being met by these alleged medical professionals. And I was tired for her, honestly, but not tired enough to stop showing out in school. So After another one of my outbursts, this time that resulted in a phone call home from school, this time for calling my teacher a turtle-looking ass bitch. That one I thought I said under my breath, I did not. That's when I woke up to my mom praying over me. And it wasn't like she started with the idea of handing my mental health over to the Lord. The lady has seriously tried and exhausted her other options. But she did try. So she decided to work with Jesus and classic family shaming. Now, one thing you can always count on Black mothers to do is tell all your little business when you've been acting up. And they love to tell the last person who you want to know your little business. So my mom told Aunt Gail. Now, Aunt Gail was amazing. When my mom started working at the church, Aunt Gail was just phenomenal. I wanted to be like her. I wanted to grow up with that type of audacity. She would, so when she told her, in combination of me being a little afraid of her, that Sunday I went to church and my aunt hit me with one of those. Come talk to me for a minute. Now, I was horrified because I just knew she knew what I had done. I knew she knew how I acted up in school. So I dragged my feet over to her and she says, another thing you should know about Aunt Gail is when she wasn't praising the Lord and worshiping on Sundays, she was also known for playing the tambourine and crocheting at Bible study on Wednesdays. So when I walked over to her, she said to me, your mom tells me you want to learn how to crochet. I looked at her and I, confused, said yes. And she said, yes, what? Yes, ma'am. Now, this is a common call and response between Black adults who are not your little friend and young kids like me who were honestly trying my luck. She dismissed me by saying, I'll see you on Monday. So that Monday, my mom picked me up from school, dropped me off at Aunt Gail's, and I get out of the car without my mom delivering her, you better not go in here and show your ass speech. So I walk into Aunt Gail's house, and before she would teach me how to crochet, she told me her story, her real story, the story that was underneath the reason why she would sing. She told me the story of the days when she would carry a pack of Newports and that was it. She told me the story that is underneath her testimony. I don't look like what I've been through. And then she taught me how to crochet. She handed me a needle and a ball of yarn, and she picked up her needle and ball of yarn, and she began to stitch her first row for my beginner eyes to follow. And as I watched her, I did everything she did, right? I followed her hands closely as she began to bring her pattern together with ease into a uniform stitch. Now, as I'm doing my pattern, I realize mine doesn't look anything like hers. While her work came together with ease, mine was rigid and had no form at all. So I look at her and I say, this isn't right. Mine looks nothing like yours. And she says, well, being frustrated isn't going to help now, is it? Obviously frustrated. I'm not frustrated. I just want it to be right, and this looks a mess. So she looks at me, and as my eyes begin to fill with tears, she says, look at your hands. So I direct my attention away from the needle and the thread, and I look at my hands that have begun to cramp at this point from trying so hard. My fingers were tight, whereas hers just grooved. And she says, the most important part about crocheting is controlling and maintaining your tension. Your tension determines how loose or how tight your pattern will be. If it's too loose, your pattern will have holes and gaps in it. And if it's too tight, it will be rigid and inflexible. And nobody wants a blanket that has a bunch of holes in it or doesn't move. You can't make anything without controlling and maintaining your tension. You can't make a pot holder, let alone a blanket, without tension. Do you understand? Yes. Yes, what? Yes, ma'am. I understand. In that moment, I realized at that time, my anger had become so big for me to be so young, and rightly so. In that moment, Aunt Gail made me see that before then, everyone would try to shrink my anger, even if it meant shrinking me with it. But Aunt Gail spoke to my anger, and she saw me. Now, she taught me that you can't just get rid of your anger. You have to use it. So I'm grown now, and I still get very angry. I still find myself holding tension in my body and cramping up. I'm still very angry about how this country continues to treat poor Black people. I am angry that in life, it was assumed that George Floyd didn't have $20, but in death, he could raise millions. And it makes me angry that it took what feels like a literal crack in the universe for people to see that Black people are indeed human beings who matter. And it makes me especially angry that I still have to yell into what feels like an empty void that Black women, Black queer people, and Black trans people are also worthy of celebration and worthy of being fought for. So I use tension. I apply tension. I still crochet when I'm angry. I create, and I address the root of my anger while honoring it and not just getting rid of it. And yes, Mom, I still go into places and show my ass. Thank you.
One more time, Amber J. Phillips. Love that story. I love the transformative tension that she talks about. I also love the advice of the therapist. The therapist was like, give her a universal base income. The therapist is like, take it. He's part of the Yang Gang. He's like, just give her some money. Everything will be great. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I will take it. Anybody wants to send me some money, I will consider not showing my ass. Moving on. Another storyteller. We asked him the same thing we're asking every storyteller. Tell us a tradition. Tell us something that's so fun you made it a tradition. And he said, in relationship actually to Amber's story, being butt naked all day on your birthday. From Boone, North Carolina, please welcome Ray Christian.
Hello, everyone. You know, I was unusually sensitive when I was a kid, and I had a great fondness for animals. In fact, I'd bring home every lost dog or cat or wounded bird I would find. I used to think that me and animals had a special way of communicating with each other. I saw myself as the Dr. Doolittle of the ghetto, the Dr. Doolittle of the community. Unfortunately, though, most of the community, they just thought I was strange and weird. People called me a sissy and a punk. And it didn't take long for me to understand and learn. For men and for boys in my community, the only way that you were going to be taken seriously was to be tough. So I learned to kind of put away my more sensitive side. I played football. I wrestled. I joined the Army right out of high school. I volunteered for airborne school and became a paratrooper. And I served in the infantry. And after numerous deployments, nearly 20 years on active duty, watching people die for so-called noble causes and for no good reason at all, cracks started to emerge in my personality. My peers in the Army that I was working with started to say things to me like, hey, Christian, you seem kind of nervous and jumpy. Well, I was nervous and I was jumpy. It was like sometimes I would feel like I was in this rage and it would start to boil up in me. Then I would look around in my environment and find an excuse to just strike out at it, to yell at it, to hit it, to kill it. Around about that same time, my sister was living with me. And I used to keep a shoebox full of rolled quarters in my room in a closet on the top shelf. And I had just came back from deployment, and I went upstairs into the room and I started looking for my quarters, and I couldn't find them anywhere. I came down the steps and I said to my sister, "What in the world happened to my quarters?" She answered me in a kind of weird and awkward way. Maybe somebody took them. I thought, took them? Who would have took them? Who would have came in the house, went upstairs, went in my room and took my quarters? She said, well, my friends had came over and maybe they went upstairs, maybe they took them. I looked outside. I said, are you talking about those three guys standing right there? I didn't even wait for her to respond. I started looking around. I went right into the garage and I grabbed a baseball bat. And I fast walked across that street and I drew that baseball bat back to bust their heads wide open. And the three guys were frozen in fear. And just before I struck his head, my sister yells out, "No, stop, stop. I lied. I lied. Nobody stole the quarters. I stole the quarters."
We are going to come back to Ray as soon as we get some technical problems worked out. Sorry about that. But in the meantime, we're going to go to intermission. I'm going to welcome back Sultana Isham, our musician. She's going to play, and then hopefully we'll be able to bring Ray back and continue with our show. So please welcome back Sultana Isham. One more time for Sultana Isham. Thank you very much. We now return to our last storyteller. Previously, Ray was missing a roll of quarters, and he went outside with a baseball bat to speak to some men about it. Welcome, Ray Christian.
Hey, y'all. So, like I was saying, I fast walked across that street with that baseball bat, and I swung it back to bust their heads wide open, and the three guys were just frozen in fear. And just before I was about to strike their head, my sister yells out from across the street, "No, stop, stop. I lied. I lied. Nobody stole the quarters. I took the quarters." I dropped the bat. The three guys stood there and they were still frozen in fear. I walked back across the street. I almost killed a man over a roll of quarters. It wasn't long after that I was in the grocery store. And as I was walking through the aisles, I had the sensation I was moving through a maze and the aisles were starting to close in on me. I had to get out of there, and I turned the corner and I wound up right in front of the seafood counter. And I had the impression that I saw a human eye right there on the ice. And I said, "Hey." And the man behind the counter said, "Yes, sir." I said, "An eye on the ice." He said, "Yes, sir. We get fresh fish every day." I had to get out of there. I found myself at some point at the mall. I was sitting on the bench trying to get myself together. And a middle-aged white woman, she showed up and she had her elderly mother with her. She was small and very frail. And she had her sit down beside me and she said, "Mama, I have to go to the bathroom. I want you to sit right here and I'll be right back, okay?" The lady leaves. And the old lady is just staring at me. And I'm trying to look away from her. She keeps staring at me. And then she slowly moves her trembly, old, fragile hand next to mine. And she holds it. And I cry. Her mother comes out and she sees this and she said, "Mama, what are you doing? You can't just be touching people like that. Sir, are you okay?" I said, "Yes, I'm okay." And the old lady said, "It's what he needed." It was what I needed. But I'm a soldier. I served in combat. I led people. I killed people. And now I almost killed a man over a roll of quarters. I'm delusional. I think I see a human eye on the ice. And now some old lady is comforting me. What is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? And after some encouragement from my wife and my military chain of command, I took the first long step toward talking to an Army psychiatrist. It didn't take but a couple of sessions for him to diagnose me with severe post-traumatic stress disorder with psychotic features. And with that diagnosis, I was relieved from all my official duties until I retired, which was about a year. So with medication and counseling and being removed from stressors, like being in the Army, my life started to improve. I had children. I was raising animals. I went back to school. But PTSD never really goes away. It's always there. There's always some kind of pressure building up inside me. And finally, the dam breaks. And a few years ago, I have a stroke. Now, in the aftermath of the stroke, the physical changes in me were weakness in my left leg, weakness in my left hand and arm. But more troubling and more problematic was the emotional changes in me. In the aftermath of the stroke, I started seeing subtle nuances in the world that I didn't see before. Much like the way that Dorothy, when she opened that door in The Wizard of Oz and everything went from black and white to color. I mean, I would see a baby and I would just start to cry because I would be thinking, oh my God, look at all the potential. And I'd see a couple looking at each other in the eyes and I would cry because I would feel like the world is so cruel to people in love. But this is bothering me because I can't just be crying every time somebody says hello. Hi, Ray, how you doing? Hi. The light turns green, it's green. I mean, this is problematic. So I go back to the doctor and I talk to him and I tell him about the symptoms that I'm having. And he says, this is a side effect of a stroke. and it's what's known as pseudo-bulbar disorder or emotional incontinence. And he said that if the symptoms were really disturbing to me, he could prescribe a type of medication. But before I tell you what I said to the doctor, let me tell you something. Some point ago, I was looking at TV and I saw this commercial. And there's these squirrels playing in a road. And this car starts barreling down the highway. And just before it hits the squirrel, it swerves and crashes. And two squirrels run out in the middle of the road and they hug each other. And they give each other the fist bumps. And I start breathing heavy. My heart starts beating real fast. Water starts to well up in my eyes. Because I'm thinking, oh my God, the love they must have for each other. All the nuts they must have gathered. So back to what I said to the doctor. In terms of the pills that would make the symptoms go away, I said, no, thanks. I'll keep this one. Thank you, everyone.
One more time for Ray Christian from Boone, North Carolina. I love the end of that story. I love that story so much. All the love those squirrels had. I'm going to be laughing at that for a long time. All right, so normally we would have intermission, and then after intermission, the host tells a little story. So I'm going to do that now because this is what we do. And the subject of my story is the 1997 musical Ragtime and Audra McDonald in that music. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to talk about that right now. Question: what was the last like crowd you remember being in with just total abandon before all of this? I was trying to figure it out the other day, and my book came out in February, and so I was in a number of crowds. But the first thing that came to mind was not a book tour stop. It was a concert, and it was the last concert I went to, which was Macy Gray. I love Macy Gray, and my friend Jeff found the tickets, and he was like, Macy Gray's coming, and I was like, can you believe this? The people that I love, the artists and the concerts that I love, I don't pay attention to whether their fame is waxed or waned. I always feel like we have to rush to get tickets today, front row, but the way I've gone to concerts has changed a little bit. Macy Gray was also the first concert that I went to as an adult. I was in college and I was obsessed with Macy Gray. It was like 1999, and I was going to college in New York City. And New York was very overwhelming to me. It's a big city, obviously, and I was a freshman in college, and I was pretty sheltered as a kid, and I wasn't out really to myself or to the world, but it was quite queer quite queer, yeah, literally. It was quite queer that I was clear. And that was intimidating. That was scary to me. And so I was not the crushed velvet wearing host that you see before you today. I was shrunken in on myself and pretty shy and weird. But I loved Macy Gray. She had this funky, wild spirit about her. And I loved her music. Stay, I Try, The Letter, Relating to a Psychopath, classics. And I would hear it all over. I felt like Macy Gray followed me around New York City, like she was my raspy voice fairy godmother. I hear her in the dressing room at the H&M or in the bank when I was waiting to withdraw the $3 I had in my account. And so there was an opportunity through the student activities office to go see her at the Meadowlands. And so, they were going to run a bus out there. It was one of those radio concerts. There was a whole bunch of people. And I think there was like big headliners, like, I don't know, like, who knows? Justin Timberlake or Lynyrd Skynyrd. I couldn't tell you. I was like, Macy Gray, well, one ticket for Macy Gray, please. And I got on that bus by myself, and I went to Macy Gray, and it was great. She rolled around on the stage. She was playing the tambourine, jumping and shouting. It was phenomenal. I'm not a very effusive concert attendee. I like to sit quietly and appreciate. And so that's what I did at Macy Gray, and which maybe seems like from the outside, like I wasn't enjoying myself, but I had the time of my life. And the minute Macy Gray went off stage, I got up and got back on the bus and went back to campus. I didn't know where I was. The Meadowlands sounds like someplace that you'd see on The Sopranos, and I had to get out of there and get back to my dorm room. I'm just a sort of shy concert goer. I don't know necessarily how to really let myself get loose. I'll tell you, the first concert I went to was with my mother when I was 13 years old. She got me a present to go see Bette Midler. Again, I was not out, but for some reason, it just seemed right that this 13-year-old boy wanted to go see Bette Midler in the mid-'80s. And I did with all of my heart. I used to listen to the Beaches soundtrack every week. And so this was my dream. And we went to the Bette Midler concert, and we were, again, sitting quietly, applauding and just sort of taking in the concert. And Bette Midler, as a concert artist, is beyond really, really wild. And at one point, she leans over the stage and she's like, "Where is my gays at? Where are my gays?" And I was stricken. I was like, "There are gays at a Bette Midler concert? Oh, no." I leaned forward. I was like, "No gays up here, my lady. Just heterosexuals who like a well-sung ballad." I've changed, of course, since then. My concert going has gotten gayer and a little bit freer. But when I went to Macy Gray a couple months ago, back when we could do things, and without fear and without the necessary restrictions, I had this moment of transformation. I was sitting on a bar stool, watching her sing these songs that had walked me through this strange, fraught, weird period in my life. And all of a sudden, time collapsed. And I was 18, and I was myself. And I looked out over the audience, and there were all these, I was shocked, actually, that there were all these, 40 and 50 and 60-year-old people in the audience who were having the time of their life. They were having dad and mom's night out. I thought that Macy Gray's core audience was weird proto-gay college students. I had no idea that there was actually she was a huge recording artist. I really didn't know. And they were living their lives. And the sight of them living their lives and the memory of the way that I wanted to live my life back then, and I couldn't, I wouldn't, sort of collided right there on that bar stool. And the music overtook me, and I found myself, suddenly I'm on my feet, I'm standing on the little rickety stool, and I'm shouting, and I'm waving my hands like one of those car wash blow-up things. And the bouncer comes over, and he's like, "Excuse me, sir, sit down." And I was like, "I'm living my best life." It was amazing. It was everything I could have wanted. And if I never get to go to another concert, which I hope I do, but if I never do, I will always be able to hold on to that moment where all the time collapsed. And it was just me and all the people I used to be and all the people I hope to become, and Macy Gray and freedom. Thank you. I'm going to move on to our next storyteller. We asked her, again, the same question. Tell us about something that was so fun that you made it into a tradition. And she answered, simply, gummy bears and Jello. Please give it up from Lansing, Michigan, Andrea Collier.
Hello, everybody. And to my sorors, I need to get that in. I got married in 1982, and we were cute, but we also couldn't be much different from each other. I was a spoiled only child, and my husband was one of 6. We were so different, and I was so awkward that when I met his folks, I said, "How do you remember all of those names?" And that went over really well. The one thing that we did have in common is that we were children of the 60s, and we went out with picket signs as kids. We knew about segregation and not swimming in the swimming pool because only white people swam in those pools. We helped with voter registration. We understood that Black Lives Mattered. And the other thing that we understood was that much was expected of us. Our folks had a dream for us. and they expected us to live up to it, and we wanted to make them proud. So when we had our own kids, we didn't know a lot about being married and having kids, but we did know that we expected them to follow the script. In fact, we were the Huxtables before the Huxtables. We used to tell them, I brought you into this world and I will take you out. Now, one of them believed us and she followed the script. She went through school, she got a good degree, she got her dream job, she married her dream guy and had her dream baby, and then quit the dream job to take care of the dream baby. Now, my son, on the other hand, had a script. It wasn't our script, and I'm not even sure he knew what the script was, but some kind of way it involved staying in the basement. And no matter what I did, no matter what my husband did, he would come and go, but it always ended up as he lived in the basement, even though we wanted to have an empty nest. But one day, he left and he didn't come back. No note, no email, no phone call, just gone. And it lasted for a long time. I was just about to call the police 2 weeks later because, you know, not much has changed. Being a young Black man who is missing is not a good thing. But just as I was about to call the police, he calls and he says, I need to come and tell you something. Okay, but this is what I know. If you've got kids over 16, you know that if a person calls and says, Mom, I have something to tell you, it is not going to be good. It is never, I won the lotto, I have enough money to move out, and goodbye. It's never, I got a great new job and I'm moving out. It's never, I fell in love with Beyonce, she's leaving Jay-Z, and I'm moving out. None of that ever happens, especially the moving out part. He shows up. My husband says, you're not gonna have to wait that long, because he's walking up and down the driveway, rehearsing whatever he's gonna say to you. And so I didn't have to think about it that long because he appears. And when he appears, he says, we're going to have a baby. Now, you know, this was not part of my script. We're going to have a baby. Now, my head is about to explode. I'm about to say something probably unpleasant. And then the God voice, or the crazy Kanye voice, sometimes you never know which one it is, says, ask him to say it again. And I do. Say it again. He says, we had a baby yesterday. Now, I definitely did not see that coming. Say it one more time. We had a baby yesterday. Now, I really think that I am going to have a stroke. But some kind of way, the God voice or the Kanye voice or God took the wheel and said out of my mouth, how nice for you. Even I had to stop and look and think about what was happening. And then I asked questions like, oh, how are mom and baby doing? They're fine. Where are they now? They're still at the hospital. Everybody's good, nothing wrong. No, everything is fine. And then the one question that me and crazy Kanye wanted to know was, well, what is the baby's name? With millennials, especially Black millennials, names can go south real fast and definitely not a part of the script. You know, they can go with a little Jack Daniels. They can go with Alizé, Tommy Hilfiger, stuff you can't even spell. And if they're white millennials, the name might be Apple. So I'm a little worried. And he says, no, the baby's name is Miles. That was the best thing out of the whole damn thing. Baby's name is Miles. I can say it, I can spell it. He can go to school and not have a problem. Miles, I liked that. And as I was explaining to him that we both have colds, my husband and I, and we can't go see the baby right away, before I could get that out, he disappeared. He was gone. So I'm a new grandmother. I can't see the baby. So what do? I go to Target. Doesn't everybody go to Target? I go to Target because if you have something on your mind, I'm just going to tell you, you can work a whole lot of shit out walking up and down the aisles of Target. So that's what I did. And I didn't go to the baby section. I went everywhere else because I wasn't sure what I thought about this whole baby thing. But I decided to call one of my mother's oldest and dearest friends, one of the women who had stood in the gap for me. And as soon as I heard her voice, I lost it. Hey, baby, I didn't know. He didn't tell me. I haven't seen a baby. I was hysterical. And she said, let me get this straight. Got a new baby? Yes. Baby's name is Miles? Yes. Is the baby gonna live with you? No. Okay, so that's good. And you don't know what to do. That's correct. So she says, I'm gonna tell you what you're gonna do. You're gonna stop crying. You're gonna put on your big girl pants, and you are gonna go be the best damn grandmother you know how to be, just like your grandparents were to you. And instantly I got it. I knew what to do, but I had a few questions. And I started to ask them. And as soon as she said what she had to say, she had hung up on me. There was nothing left for me to ask her. She was gone. She was out of there. So I did what I would do under normal circumstances. I went to the baby section and I bought everything that they had to offer. I drove home and I sent my husband back to get all the rest of the crap that I bought. But in the meantime, on the drive from Target home, I got really pissed because I knew somebody knew that this was going on and nobody told me. I get home and my husband is there with his glasses on his nose and he's reading the newspaper. And my daughter happens to be there. And I said, who knew? Why didn't anybody tell me? What kind of mess is that? Why didn't you tell me? And my daughter says, because you are scary and intimidating. And I went, what? He said, you're scary. Who wants to tell you that? So I'm trying to argue about how I'm not scary. And she says, okay, let me put it to you this way. You are Oprah. And I'm thinking, that's not a bad thing to be. But she says, no. You're not, you get a car, you get a car, you get a car, Oprah. You are Miss Sophia with her fist balled up saying, you told Harpo to beat me. Oh, okay. She says, you are Eveline from The Wiz, telling people don't give me no bad news. Okay. And you know you're Claire Huxtable, the queen of the side-eye. Okay. I had to buy all of that. And I had a chance to think about that before I went to see the baby. The time came and my daughter is coaching me. Don't be you now. Don't go say anything crazy. Be nice. The whole time on the way over to the house, my text is going off. It's her. I'm just waiting for the person to just start walking. We get there, and the reason that I didn't know that she was pregnant is because I had only seen the baby's mother from the waist up. And so when we got there, her mother is like, where you been? And I'm trying to say that I didn't know and that it didn't make sense to apologize. But we're sitting there, it's super uncomfortable, and the baby's not in the room. So they finally bring the baby out, and this changes everything. This beautiful baby, they put the baby in my arms, and I look in his little face, and I see my son, I see my husband, I see my daughter, I even see me, or the baby had gas, but I thought I saw me. And then I saw everybody that I had ever loved and who had ever loved me in this baby's face. So the heart that was broken broke wide open. I'd never experienced anything like this, not even with my own children. He was everything. And then I thought about something that I had heard when the kids were teenagers, which was Toni Morrison had said, your eyes should light up whenever they come into the room. Well, they were teenagers. Nobody's face was lighting up when they came into the room, I promise you. But I thought about that as I looked at Miles. Yeah, I got it. And then the rest of what she said was, because they know how you feel about them by the way that they read your eyes. They can tell how you feel. And at that moment, I knew that every time I looked at Miles, he was going to see that love for the rest of my life. Thank you.
That was Andrea Collier. One more time for her. I think Andrea is so funny. I laugh so hard every time I hear that story. And the thing that I cannot believe is that her daughter told her that she was Eveline in The Wiz. I would never dare to say that, something like that to my mother. Also, not to be too technical, but let's get some clarity around what Eveline in The Wiz really wanted. She sang the song, Don't Nobody Bring Me No Bad News. What did she want? No bad news. Who wants bad news? Not me. Eveline was a visionary. Eveline is my life coach. I'm here for Eveline. Anyway, moving on. We've got one more storyteller. And we asked her, what is a tradition? What is something so, oh my goodness, what is something so fun that you made it into a tradition? She said simply, gardening. From Louisville, Kentucky, please welcome Hannah Drake.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. In 2016, I had the opportunity to travel to Dakar, Senegal. I was going to Dakar with a group of performance artists called Roots and Wings. And on this trip, I had the opportunity to bring my daughter, who at the time was 20 years old. The week that we were scheduled to leave, I logged into Facebook, and streaming live was the murder of Philando Castile. Philando Castile was a passenger in his girlfriend's car, and she went live during this altercation with him and the police. And he was shot. And on the video, I saw his blood start to pool across his white t-shirt. And his girlfriend was screaming, I know you just didn't kill him. And her daughter was in the back seat, and she was saying, it's gonna be okay, mommy. In that same week, Alton Sterling was also killed by the police. He was shot in the chest selling CDs outside of a convenience store, and someone had videoed it and put it on Facebook. So I also witnessed the murder of Alton Sterling. And I knew that I was just so ready to get out of here. And admittedly, I felt a little guilty to leave because as a writer and a poet So many people were asking me, Hannah, what do you have to say about this? And I just didn't have any words. I was just ready to leave. And when we got off the plane in Senegal, the minute my feet touched the ground, I knew that this was a place where I belonged. And my friend Cynthia was on the trip with me, and we decided to buy some earrings. And we were in the shop, and we were holding the earrings in such a way that the shop owner wouldn't think that we were trying to steal them. We were so used to being in America and for it being a crime to be shopping while Black. And when we went to pay for the earrings, we realized the shop owner was outside of the shop talking to someone. And it dawned on us that there, simply being Black wasn't a crime. And it was like the world finally opened up to me and said, Hannah, we've been waiting for you. And I was determined to enjoy every minute that I was in Senegal. But I knew that there would be one part of this trip that would be difficult for me, and it was when we were going to Gory Island. And Gory Island is an island that houses the House of Slaves, and it is the final point where Africans would be before they were put on slave ships and brought to America. And you have to take a boat to get to Gory Island. And when we were on this boat, the mood was so somber. You could hear a pin drop, and we could see Gory Island off into the distance. And we got off of the boat and we stepped into the House of Slaves. They call it a slave castle, but really it's a 2-story stone building. And in this building, they have rooms for men, women, infants, and people that would resist. And I went in the room for women, and my daughter went into the room for young girls. And I was staring out of the window, and when I say window, it couldn't have been more than 2 inches wide. And I could hear my daughter start crying. And the sound that came from her was a sound I'd never heard come from her before. And you could hear her crying fill up this space and echo in this building. And I started walking to the door of no return. And as I stood in the door, I could hear my daughter crying. And I tried to imagine what it would feel like to stand in that door and not know where I was going and not be able to say goodbye to my daughter. And it was unimaginable. And I will never forget the way she sounded when she was crying. But I also could never forget that for 2 weeks, I was just free. And when we came back to America, I was so incredibly depressed. And I knew that I was back to being the other person again. And I knew that I was back to being criminalized for shopping. And I knew that I was back to being concerned about driving while Black. And I called my mom to tell her about my trip. And I told her, Mom, for 2 weeks, I was free. And we started talking about Gory Island, the slave ships, and coming to America, and the slaves being here and picking cotton. And my mom, she's 70 years old, and she so nonchalantly says, well, Hannah, you know, when I was a little girl, I used to pick cotton. And I'd never heard my mom tell me this story before. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, when I was a little girl, my grandmother would come pick up me and my brothers and sisters, and we'd get on a bus. and go to the cotton fields and pick cotton for 80 cents a day. And I was stunned. And I asked her, well, how long did you do this? And she said, I did it from the time that I was 9 to 12 for 3 years. And I said, well, tell me about it. What happened in these cotton fields? And she would tell me about pulling the cotton and the cotton bolts cutting her fingers, and they would bleed. And I asked her, can you tell me about your grandmother? And she said, I can't. And I said, well, what was her name? And she said, I don't remember her name. We used to just call her Mamie. And I thought once again that my mom, my grandmother, and all of these stories were just lost in cotton fields. And I knew I felt compelled to go to these cotton fields. And as life would have it, my job said, Hannah, you're going to Natchez, Mississippi. And I thought, no, I'm not going to Natchez, Mississippi. As a Black woman, I didn't want to go to Mississippi, but indeed I did. And they connected me with a tour guide, and he was going to be there to help me get around Natchez. And I was there to work with a group of young girls called Girls and Pearls and teach them about art and history and heritage. And I knew that I had to take my daughter on this trip with me. And in order to get to Natchez, you fly into Baton Rouge, and you have to drive from Baton Rouge to Natchez. And the tour guide told me, when you get to Baton Rouge and you drive to Mississippi, Hannah, do not drive through Jackson, Mississippi, because I cannot guarantee your safety. And I remember getting in that car, and my daughter and I were so afraid. And it was like going back in time, and you could see the street change from asphalt to gravel. And there were Confederate flags everywhere and plantation homes. And as far as my eyes could see, there were cotton. And so we started touring the plantation homes. And at the time, I'd only seen plantation homes in books or what you see on TV. And I thought you could just go see them. And the tour guide said, oh no, Hannah, they still live in those homes. And so you'd have to pay to go visit these homes. And I thought, maybe I should get a discount or something. For all I know, my family helped build these homes. But we would pay the fee, and we'd go and we'd start touring these homes, and they were stunning. When I say homes, these were not two-story homes. These were mansions. And many of them still had the original bedding and the original china and all of the furnishings still. And after a while, the homes just started to look alike. And so I asked one of the tour guides of one of the homes, well, take me where my people would have been, because I know that I would not have been in these homes. Take me to the slave quarters. And she told me, oh, we bricked all those over. We changed those into offices. And once again, I felt like my history was just gone. And I went to another plantation home, and the tour guide was there. He was a Black man. There's only 2 Black tour guides in Natchez. And he started showing me around the home, and we went and we saw the kitchen, the dining room table. My daughter's touching everything in this house. And finally, I leaned over and I whispered and asked her, why are you doing that? And she said, I wanted to touch things that I knew slaves wouldn't be able to touch. And when we were in the dining room, they still had the fine china and that a casserole dish. And on the casserole dish, the knob was cotton, but it was solid gold. And above this dining room table, there was a huge fan with a string tied to it. And I didn't know what it was. And I asked the tour guide, what is that? And he said, that is called a punka. And typically a slave, typically a young girl would be in the corner and she'd have to pull this string so the fan would wave and keep flies off food. And I was so heartbroken that someone was enslaved just to keep flies off food. And the tour guide told me, don't weep for her, because she had a very important job. When people eat, they talk, and her job was to stand and listen to everything that was said around that table, because she could hear that it may be possible for her and her family to go to freedom. And her job was to go back and tell her mother everything she heard around the table. And on our last plantation, I knew that it was time for me to go to the cotton fields. And this plantation had 1,800 acres of cotton. And it was the first time that I actually saw the bags that slaves were required to fill with cotton. And the bag is 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. And I asked the owner of the home, well, how much cotton can fit in one of these bags? And she told me 70 pounds. And slaves were required to pick 200 to 300 pounds a day. And finally, I stepped into the cotton fields. And I thought about my mom. I thought about my daughter. I thought about my grandmother, whose name I never knew. And I started running my fingers along the cotton, and I thought about Senegal and Gory Island. And I remember when we went, the curator of Gory Island told us, welcome back home, you made it. Everybody didn't get a chance to come back. And I started picking the cotton. And I remembered what the tour guide said about the little girl pulling the string to the fan, that she had a very important job. And I knew that I still had something to say, and that my job was to go back and tell the story. And today, I stand here to go back and tell the story of Brianna Taylor, who was murdered in Louisville, Kentucky. Thank you.
That was Hannah Drake. And that's our show tonight. Tonight's show was produced by Chloe Salmon and Patricia Eugenio, directed by Catherine Burns, Jenifer Hixson, and Jodi Powell. We're going to, one more time, let's welcome all of our storytellers back. First, Hannah Drake, everyone. Andrea Collier. Ray Christian. And Amber J. Phillips. My name is R. Eric Thomas. I thank you for joining us this evening. Please stay tuned for the credits. And just a content warning about the credits. After the credits, there is a segment where after the credits, you're going to see a list of names Black people who have been murdered by the police. And that may not be something that is where you are, in the place to see. So, anyway, have a great night. Thank you for joining us.